a lot of this well-meaning bad marriage advice that is given in the temple, I find a lot, is at one time, it was good marriage advice, right? Like, and it's very intentioned, but it's been handed down through the years and through the generations. And the reality is that so much has changed. We don't live in the same world that we lived in decades ago. And so what once maybe was good advice is no longer good marriage advice. And so I think that's really important to remember. Some of these things, I just recently was talking about this story of it's the woman who cooks the roast, and every time she cooks the roast, she cuts both ends off, right? Uh-huh. And her husband is like, drives him crazy. He's like, why do you waste all of that meat? And she's like, well, I don't know. And so she's like, it's how my mom always did it. And so she asks her mom, and her mom's like, I don't know. It's how your grandma did it. And so they go back, and what they figure out is that originally the great-great-grandma didn't have a pan large enough to fit the roast. And so she would cut the ends off. And now through the generations, every generation of this of women in this family now cuts the roast off, but it's not necessary anymore. And so it's important to reevaluate these things that get handed down, these little trite pieces of, don't sweat the small stuff, happy wife, happy life, don't go to bed angry is such a big one,
we'll
right?
Get to that. I'm excited to tackle that.
But, it's important to think about what's the origin of this. Maybe this was good advice at some point, but it's no longer serving.
In the Latter-day Saint faith tradition, we really champion marriage. Now, most Christian churches do, but obviously we take it to a whole nother level with sealings and ordinances and eternal marriage. And so I'm excited to bring in Monica Tanner, who wrote a book called Bad Marriage Advice. And we talk about marriage and this relationship, this eternal relationship in the context of our faith tradition, in the context of our doctrine. And what is some bad marriage advice that we even perpetuate in our faith tradition, like never go to bed angry. Come on, terrible advice. And we talk about that and many other bad pieces of marriage advice. Now, I really encourage you to go to the show notes, follow Monica Tanner and the content she puts out. She's a coach for married couples, and not just Latter-day Saint couples, but anybody who's married. And she puts so many great content of virtual summits and podcasts and just all sorts of content to help stimulate a happy marriage, some best practices of marriage. She's like the leading saints of marriage, right? And really phenomenal perspective. And that's why I was excited to have her in town and talk to her about bad marriage advice in our faith tradition as a Latter-day Saint. So let's jump into it. Here's my interview with Monica Tanner, the author of Bad Marriage Advice. So Monica, tell me, what are you seeing as you meet with different couples and marriages? Like what are the common things coming up right now that you're seeing again and again? You can almost expect couples to struggle with these types of things.
Well, it's interesting because whenever a couple comes to see me, I would say 95% of the time, if I ask them, what's going on, they'll say, we need help communicating.
Communication, it's always that, right?
It's such a big issue for people. But I'm really seeing a lot of couples later in their marriage. They've been married 20, 30 years. They've raised their kids, and they're kind of at a crossroads. Do we stay together at this point because we don't feel connected, and or do we go our separate ways and spend the rest of our lives doing something different? So that's a big one. I think faith transitions is a big one. One of the two is questioning their faith, or is, in a different place than when they got married. And so, the question is do we still have the same values? Can we still make this work? Do we still want to stay together? So those are two big ones that I see.
And, the children dynamic is an interesting one. And not that maybe you have the stats understood better than I do, but I imagine there's a lot of divorce or separations once that they become empty nesters because...
It's a huge phenomenon. In fact, it has a nickname, gray divorce.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
Yeah, the stats are skyrocketing. I mean, the life expectancy is longer. And so people are looking down the barrel of we've got 30, 40 more years. And do we want to stay with the same person, or do we want to start over with someone we don't have this baggage and resentment and all of the things? So I think it's a real question for people now.
Yeah. And we all have seen those couples, and they may be our parents, right? Where they're older, they kind of just bicker at each other, and you're like, are you guys even happy together? And which is unfortunate, but it's almost like at that those gray divorces, like it's almost too late at that point. I mean, obviously it's not, but a lot of that comes from the children have been such a focus of the relationship for so long that then they're gone, and then it's like, oh, you're still here. Like,
yeah,
we're gonna have to date again or get reunited again, right?
Yeah, and it's a huge goal of mine to, kind of, I think couples get into this idea where, we've been together so long, we're just going to tolerate. I mean, we're used to each other. We kind of get it. We're just going to spend the rest of our lives tolerating each other, where they don't have to. I mean, you still have so much time. You can do so much together and have this passionate, intimate, really fun relationship. Enjoy those later years of your life where you're now seeing your grandkids grow up and watching your kids be parents, and like all of the, like, I feel like it's the payoff of all the hard work of parenting, right? But if you're not enjoying who you're doing it with, it just makes it harder.
Yeah. And in our faith tradition, that's where I think like missions, senior missions can be really powerful. Like having a joint focus and journey together can do a lot. But again, that's maybe only 18 months or then you come over that. Now what? Right. So
totally. Yeah.
That's interesting. Just do you find that you're hearing from or coaching, is that who in that transition the most that are asking for the help, or what demographics do you typically see?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several reasons why it's that age. I mean, at this point, people are financially secure and, but at the same time, there's also a lot of scenarios where you have the woman who is, kind of given up all of her career aspirations or anything like that to raise the children, but maybe the family has made enough money to, so, I think finances are a big component in that, but I think a lot of families are in a situation where they can afford to, now fund two households but there's also a lot of couples who aren't, but I find those are the couples that come see me. They're like, financially, we can do this, and we there's nothing connecting us anymore. The kids have all grown. We've kind of done our job. And now we kind of want to go have fun. The question is are they going to have fun together or are they going to have fun separately?
Yeah. What advice would you give to a couple, whether they're older, or just at any stage of their marriage, where they feel the tension, they know something's off, they know they need help, but man, they're barely making ends meet. Therapy seems out of the question. Coaching seems out of the question. Obviously, they can pick up a book maybe, but what advice would you give for those who know that they need some marital help, but maybe can't afford some of the resources out there?
Well, I think there are so many resources. So, I mean, it's a matter of like doing some research. I mean, lots of people who do what I do, they'll have sliding scales, they'll, make room for, some pro bono work and things like that. So always look into your options, is I think my number one advice is to get help. Like, please just, don't cut ties before you've tried everything. And so there's lots and lots of ways. If you don't feel, in a financial position to get the help that you need, still seek it, because there's lots of resources there.
So take us into the Latter-day Saint world as far as marriage. Like, are you seeing the same things? Is there any unique characteristic or component in our culture that comes up, or what do you see from that point of view?
Yeah, I think that there's still just a tiny bit of a stigma around asking for help with your marriage. Like, if we're doing the right things, if we're praying, going to the temple, and we've been promised that we're not going to struggle here. I think there's still a little bit of stigma around asking for help. And so I think that's unfortunate, because that isn't the case. And then I also think, whether expressed or unexpressed, I think there is this idea that divorce is not an option. And so we're just kind of stuck, and a lot of times where I see this really cause problems for people is when one partner is like, why should I don't need to go with you to therapy, or why should I change anything? You're stuck with me. We made covenants. Like, there's no reason for me to work on the marriage or challenge myself or be uncomfortable here, because we're locked in. And so I think that causes a lot of problems. Whereas the flip side of that is, let's create a marriage where we both want to be here. Yeah.
It really is like a double-edged sword where, and I think statistically it's shown that temple marriages can really stimulate a positive and long-lasting relationship. But also you can feel like this place of like, we can't even question you were almost trapped. Like, we're locked in for eternity, forever,
Yes.
right?
And it doesn't matter if we like each other or we're, working hard on the marriage or anything. Yeah. We went to the temple and so that's it. Right. Yeah. And I think that is really unfortunate because, I think the idea behind this divorce is not an option is to create more commitment. But what it really does is the opposite. I mean, it creates, it feels entrapping. It feels, like you don't have any options. There's a lot of a feeling of obligation. Yeah. So, it's much more if you both feel that there's a choice, you're in it not out of obligation, but out of choice. And that creates more freedom, that creates more passion and intimacy and love, trust and respect. And so I actually feel like it does the opposite when you kind of operate under the assumption that divorce is not an option, that we're locked in. It just creates a lot more obligation, resentment, feeling trapped, and a lot of complacency, which is a big passion and intimacy killer.
Yeah. This concept of choice is really interesting. And you see it in different contexts in the church where even in our like faith development, like we talk about a testimony, right? Like I received a testimony, I had a spiritual witness, like it's almost like this event, and hopefully it's so big that it carries you throughout life. Like you're solid in the gospel. But really, like, I think the more realistic view of our belief is to say, no, every day I have to make a choice to believe. And that's going back to the scriptures and wrestling with things and realizing there's complicated theology or history or whatever, and say, I know that's there, but I'm going to make a choice to lean in to this. And so in marriage, we often see it the same way. Like, no, you have a temple marriage. It's sealed, right? Even that terminology can be heavy, that you don't need to make a choice anymore. You're just in. And if the marriage isn't going well and you don't feel like you have that choice, where I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like couples would be in a better state of mind if every day they're choosing this person over and over and over again. Right?
Absolutely. And agency is a huge concept in our doctrine, right? God wanted us to have choice. Like, not having choice, that was Satan's plan, right? So in all aspects of our life, I think God wants us to choose. He wants us to question. He wants us to get information, to seek for more, and to make good choices that are good for us, right? And I mean, that's part of the reason we came here, is to learn how to make good choices.
Yeah. And that's where some of these things have been sort of rehashed over and over, like date night, right? But the concept of that is like every week, make a choice to connect and be together, and ideally every day, right? And so it's just these little efforts to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, I work with couples a lot on that, but we all want to feel chosen, right? And so like, again, even having date night be an obligation. Like I want couples to go on date night because they want to be together. They choose to make this time for each other, right? And so like, I say, non-negotiable date night is really, really important. But also you're showing your kids, you're showing your partner, like, hey, this is a choice. We are choosing to carve this time out of our busy schedules with all the other things going on to be together, to work on our relationship and to have some fun together, right? And so date night, daily connections, I talk about a lot, and at least a yearly getaway are so important, not just for the fact of doing them, but also showing your partner, listen, I choose you and I choose to spend this time with you.
Yeah. It's so true. And I'm just reflecting on my own journey. Like, so we had our 20-year anniversary in January,
Congrats.
We made, right?
Congrats.
Very, like it went by so fast, right? But we're kind of in this phase where I don't know if it's common, but we're seeing a lot of peers, start to get divorced, and it's sort of like, but you've made it 20-ish years, like let's go another 20, right? But it kind of was like it built up enough where it spilled over and we have to make a choice here. And unfortunately, this is a choice we're going, right? And so I'm just, man, and just the effort of that marriage is, and being that choice of like, it's not like you get to a place where you coast, because that's almost like the silent cancer in a relationship, when that complacency,
I call it
right?
complacency, right? Where intimacy goes to die.
Yeah, where intimacy goes to die.
That's
the title of your next book.
Yeah.
But what we are talking about is these. I'm
going to write that down after this. Remind me.
Okay. Well, it'll be on record here. So, this is one of many in your book. You talk about bad marriage advice, and it's not for an LDS audience per se, but it is obviously applicable there. But you do hear some things like, even I sometimes I'll be in a sealing, and the sealer kind of has his what would you call it? Just his
advice,
his canned advice or whatever.
Yeah,
and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems sincere, but sometimes he's maybe an older gentleman, and I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, and you're telling this young couple, but oh well, we're here to celebrate whatever, right? So these creep up in different places for sure. And this is one of those of divorce is not an option. Which now then this is a good opportunity to maybe go to that leadership context where many leaders are listening. Yeah. And I remember being the bishop where the couple comes in, or I remember getting a late night call from a couple. I don't think they had any kids at times, and he was leaving, like he was done with the marriage, and like here I, go over.
Heartbreaking. You're like, oh.
Yeah, and here I am sitting there thinking like, wait a minute, what? No, like stop it, because naturally, as a church, from the church leader perspective, I think it's really easy for us to go to a place of like, but the temple sealing, the marriage, like this isn't just something we shrug off and move on, right? And so naturally, whether we intend it or not, as church leaders, we go to this place of trying to save the marriage for the sealing's sake, right? And of course, I think most of us are mature enough to know that, like, yes, that is important, but we can't, when we go to these places of absolutes where it's like, it's a tragedy if this marriage fails. Well, he's kind of abusive, or, she doesn't, whatever it is, right? Like, there's things to work out. So it's such this like sacred space that we want to save it at all costs, when in reality, I don't know if that's always the best choice, right?
It's true. And that's a really important consideration when we say divorce is not an option. If somebody is getting hurt in the marriage, then, maybe that marriage isn't meant to work out, or maybe one partner needs a lot of help to be able to be more relational. And so when you say divorce is not an option, that's basically giving license for the abusive partner to continue doing what they're doing. When you say, hey, if this doesn't get better, if we don't work on this, if we don't fix this, I'm going to leave the marriage. That's a very strong motivator. It's good leverage, and it's important not to take that off the table. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, we don't need to rush to it. Or I remember meeting with couples who are just in the emotion of the struggle, and they just, this is over, like, whoa, like that will always be an option to file the divorce papers or whatever, especially when there's maybe infidelity. It's like, tomorrow I'm getting an attorney, we're going to do this. Like, great. Well, let's just maybe step back and take a breath, and we can always consider that option, right? Because I guess that's where it could turn out bad, is if things are done in high emotion or, just too quickly. Right?
Yeah. And I remember thinking before in my younger years that infidelity was like, nope, that's it. Not gonna ever salvage that, right? Yeah. But I feel like with experience and now seeing lots of couples overcome that, a lot of times that can be overcome. And it's also the catalyst for fixing a lot of the dysfunctional dynamics inside of a marriage. And a lot of couples, it doesn't have to be the deal breaker.
Yeah. And what I've heard actually from other therapists is that the vast majority of couples who experience infidelity, their marriage actually works out. Like it's not true.
So
rare
we're not
thing.
Saying go out and be unfaithful, right?
Yeah.
Right. But we are saying it's, it can be overcome, and it often is.
Yeah. And we're also not saying that, maybe the bishops would say, well, have you thought about divorce, or let's bring that, obviously if it gets to there, you discuss it and help them navigate it. And this is the tricky thing, because we don't want to encourage, of course we want to respect the sealing and the ordinance and all those things, but and I think it says in the handbook, it changes so much that, at least I feel like it does, that I can't, at least it used to, where it's like a bishop or church leader shouldn't like encourage or discourage a divorce, like trying to be that.
So you said something actually very interesting there that I just kind of want to highlight, is that the handbook has changed so much. A lot of this well-meaning bad marriage advice that is given in the temple, I find a lot, is at one time, it was good marriage advice, right? Like, and it's very intentioned, but it's been handed down through the years and through the generations. And the reality is that so much has changed. We don't live in the same world that we lived in decades ago. And so what once maybe was good advice is no longer good marriage advice. And so I think that's really important to remember. Some of these things, I just recently was talking about this story of it's the woman who cooks the roast, and every time she cooks the roast, she cuts both ends off, right? Uh-huh. And her husband is like, drives him crazy. He's like, why do you waste all of that meat? And she's like, well, I don't know. And so she's like, it's how my mom always did it. And so she asks her mom, and her mom's like, I don't know. It's how your grandma did it. And so they go back, and what they figure out is that originally the great-great-grandma didn't have a pan large enough to fit the roast. And so she would cut the ends off. And now through the generations, every generation of of women in this family now cuts the roast off, but it's not necessary anymore. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to reevaluate these things that get handed down, these little trite pieces of, don't sweat the small stuff, happy wife, happy life, don't go to bed angry is such a big one,
we'll
right?
We'll get to that. I'm excited to tackle that.
But, it's important to think about what's the origin of this. Maybe this was good advice at some point, but it's no longer serving.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've spent much time thinking about this, but what do you see as, and I think we've passed this tradition pretty well and maybe don't result to going to the bishop with marital issues. I mean, I found to some extent that couple just sort of needed a listening ear, mm-hmm. Not because I had any expertise or I mm-hmm. could navigate, I was early on in my own marriage myself. But sometimes people came in and they could just sort of have a mediator in the room to some extent. And that was helpful. And they went home and didn't necessarily need professional counseling or whatnot. But anything you'd say, if you're standing in front of a room full of bishops, and they're like, all right, Monica, what's our role? How can we help? What should we do?
Yeah, I would love that opportunity, actually.
Well, here we are.
I think it's important for the bishop to know that the couple is struggling, because there are resources in the word. There are people that can, mentors and, people that can reach out and give support. I remember when I was going through postpartum anxiety and I felt on an island all alone, and my visiting teachers came over, and different women in the ward, they just put their arms around me and were like, I remember this happened to me. And it was so helpful. And I know in our ward, there's lots of couples who have been through marriage issues. And if we don't talk about these things, it feels very isolating. It feels very like we're the only ones that have ever experienced this, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it is important to share with the bishop, we are struggling. We do need some help in this area. But I think it's also very important for bishops to know their lane, so to speak, mm-hmm. right? And so to have resources that they shouldn't be giving advice that they don't, in places where they don't know, right? I've heard lots of horror stories where couples were given advice by bishops, again, probably very well-meaning, mm-hmm. but they weren't trained in that area to help in that way. And so I think a bishop should say, thank you for coming to me. Here are lots of resources for you where people are trained to help you in this or this area.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the best for a bishop for any issue to be a cache of resources. Mm-hmm. Like you need some books. Here's a stack of books. You need counseling. We can get you in there. You need, here's 50 YouTube videos if you need, and start collecting that library. Yeah. And then, they make sure they get to the right resource. Because sometimes, though it's a resource, though they're professionally trained, therapists or coaches aren't always that good. And so it's good to follow up with them and be like, yes. Okay, you met with them 3 times. How's it going? Is it working? Yes. Do you jive with the coach or the therapist, right?
Yeah. So. One of the most beautiful aspects, I think, of the church is the community support aspect of it, right? And so you let the bishop or the Relief Society president know that you need some help or support. And then, being able to filter through those resources and get that help that you need.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else with the badge marriage advice of divorce is not an option? Did we cover it all? Or?
I mean, I just recently had a couple, and he's was really struggling. He's been married for 20 years to the same woman who's never apologized for anything, has never taken accountability for anything, and refuses to working on the marriage. And she won't allow him to go to the bishop. She won't get any help. And his reasoning is, he said, well, I need her to get to heaven. So, I don't want to make her mad because that'll just make it worse. And you know? And so it's really about kind of deconstructing that idea that like there needs to be a catalyst for you guys to get some help. Like both of you need to be actively working on the marriage, actively making it a marriage that you both choose. And so maybe you need to say something like, I'm considering divorce. And so either we get help together and we work on this together, or I'm going to have to walk away. Yeah. And that's, you know, those are hard. The reality is we always have choice. We always have options. We may not like the options. Yeah. We may not want those options, but we always have them. And it's just important for people to realize that and to not operate under this assumption that we don't have options. We're stuck. And so you get to do anything you want to do. And, you know, this relationship is basically abusive and a bad situation for me, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. And I think the general thing I think we want to avoid is anybody being surprised. Nobody wants to be surprised with divorce papers. Like, wait a minute, where did this come from?
Which might happen if you know, there will be a straw that breaks the camel's back, you know? So it's important to be communicate again, back to this idea of communication, be communicating all the way through. Like, you know, I'm unhappy about some things. I feel like there are things that we need to work on together, that we both need to put in the effort here. So, you know, I don't want to go file for divorce, but I'm just saying, like, if you've got to meet me where I'm at and we need help. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, just maybe for a church leader context, I want to mention is that, you know, with the theology or the doctrine of the sealing and that important ordinance, obviously we can go on and on about how important that is and what a blessing that is. I have a friend who recently went through a divorce and now he's about to get remarried. When the divorce happened, it was the sad thing. Obviously, we love both of them and we were sad to hear it wasn't going to work out. But now he's getting married and he'll have another sealing. And in the long run, like in the eternal realm, it's like that worked, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we have this perspective with repentance, like make sure you don't ever sin. Like, wait a minute, like sometimes we sin because we're mortals and likely there's a plan to overcome that. And so, yeah, sometimes divorce happens and likely there's a plan to overcome that and to find a new partner and still have all the blessings that are connected with that. And that's okay, you know?
Yeah. I think the atonement is so important. It's God's greatest gift to us, you know, is life, agency, the atonement. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that's so important. And some marriages were not meant to last. Yeah. And that's so unfortunate. But again, we can rally around both of them. And, you know, men are that they might have joy. And so it's important to find happiness. The answer is not hop from marriage to marriage until you find one that makes you happy. But I mean, it's to really reflect and to work hard but to know that God wants us to be happy. And so I think people have lots of questions about marriage and, you know, how the sealings work and how eternity works and all of that. And I think it's good to question. I think it's good to seek those answers out for yourself, because that's what makes a lot of people leave is not knowing and not feeling like they can question and not feeling like they can, you know, explore what is the doctrine here and what does happen to our sealings after we die.
Yeah. And there's this concept in psychology that applies to many things, but the fundamental attribution errors that I think a lot of church leaders will fall into, where I look at my marriage, you know, 20 years now, and we got a great marriage. Like I would not be bashful of you analyzing our marriage. I'm going to be like, I think we're doing pretty well. Right. And so it's easy for me to be like, well, if everybody just did it like us, right. And to be married at in our early 20s or whatever, and to think that, oh, it was because we did A, B, and C, and I knew, you know, that she was the one or whatever. Like sometimes, like even the best two people together trying, it just doesn't work out. And we can't just assume like, well, if you just did it differently or if you did it my way or whatever it is, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And it's sad, but it does happen. But there's redemption, and that's the beauty of the gospel, right?
Yeah, so great. And I wish that if I could get like one message to newlyweds, I wish it could be that, you know, getting help is a sign of strength and commitment. And if couples would immediately, like when they got married, get some get some coaching, get some counseling around what are the dynamics in our marriage? Is there trauma here? What questions do we have? What are some skills that we can use to get over, some things? And then where can we go when we do feel like we come up against a challenge that's too much for us, right? And so, I think the greatest gift you can give a newlywed couple is a few sessions with, and I'm going to plug relational life therapy because I think it's the best. But, a good relational life therapy who can sit down, a therapist or coach who can sit down with you and be like, these are the dynamics that you guys have. Like, you tend towards one up, you tend towards one down, you're kind of walled off, you tend towards boundaryless, just kind of get you an idea of this is where you go on your worst day. These are your losing strategies, that this is going to be your knee-jerk reaction when you get into conflict, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're aware of that, then you can make a choice. Yeah. You can choose to use these skills. But when you're not aware of it, you're just on autopilot, and that's how most people operate. And so that's when you get into these really hard clashes where, again, you can have two great people who their dynamic together is a disaster.
Yeah. I think that's great advice, especially for a church leader, maybe articulate at the beginning as they're coming in for temple recommends or living ordinance recommends, right? To articulate that. Similar to like the mission. I remember being so excited for my mission because I'd heard from so many return missionaries talking about it's the best 2 years. I loved it. I'd go back if I could, right? And then suddenly on my mission, it's not the best 2 years. I'm really struggling. I'm not liking this, right? And I felt like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me, or, maybe I missed something. And so to help in the couples expect, like, there's going to be a point where like, well, this isn't going well and I don't know what to do about it.
Yes.
And in those points, it's okay to reach out.
That's actually normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Like nothing's gone wrong. Like you're going to hit periods. In fact, we joke that's when the real marriage starts, is when you look over and you're like, I've made a terrible mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It happens to the best of us, right? And I love the resources that missionaries have now, where there's counseling out in the mission. And my children have great friends who've gone out in the mission. They've struggled. They've hit rough patches, right? And there's resources there to help them. They've been able to stay out on the mission and make it a great experience. And, I wish that we had that same type of support for newlyweds.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Should we go to the next myth or bad marriage advice here?
Let's do it.
Happy couples never fight.
Oh.
How do you respond to that? Or
well, any couple who's been married for any length of time knows that that's a terrible.
Yeah. It's like, at what point do you have the dishwasher fight? There's always that, in the first year, like, you do this wrong.
How to put the toilet paper on the roll.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're leaving your socks all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, any good marriage, you're going to, you're so flooded with all those feel-good hormones when you're dating and you found the one and they're perfect in every way and what could possibly go wrong. And then you get into life where there's a mortgage and car payments and kids and careers and money problems, and it's like a lot. And you realize that your partner isn't perfect and they have a lot of weaknesses and they might get on your nerves and they don't handle things the way that you wish they would. And couples fight. In fact, I worry more about couples who come in and say that they never fight, because that means one or both partners have withdrawn and they just don't care enough. So, or the other thing it means is that somebody's not showing up in the marriage. Somebody's like making themselves very small and just kind of laying down. And that's going to blow up and come out sideways in a lot of different ways, right? So when a couple comes in and says, we don't really fight, I'm like, ooh, why aren't you fighting, right? Yeah. Because you've got two people that come from two different backgrounds, two experiences, two opinions, two preferences. You're going to have some conflict. You're going to need some conflict resolution skills.
Yeah.
And so if people are fighting, I can teach them how to fight better. But if they're not fighting, I'm going, why aren't you fighting?
Yeah. And fighting doesn't mean screaming and throwing the china at each other, right?
Sure.
Though, I'm the guy with a podcast. With my kids, I get a little bit verbose, or, I'm a yeller. I mean, not like a violent yeller, but I'm going to raise my voice when my kids are not listening, or when I'm passionate about something, right? And sometimes I'm like, okay, I got to lower my voice here. But
so I'm maybe going to guess here that your losing strategy might be unbridled self-expression, right? Like,
yes,
I'm going to tell you all the ways you're not doing.
Maybe if I say it louder, you'll get it,
Yes.
So, but it does happen. And this is kind of a parallel to church
But you know why? It's because you care.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That is a good sign, right?
Yeah.
And I think a parallel to church leadership is, I often say, if you're not having strong debate, like in your council meetings, something's wrong here. If the whole group is just doing what the bishop says, or, we need to restructure this in a way so strong debate is happening, and people are seeking understanding and different points of view. And then actually the best revelation comes from that.
Yeah. And I call this, I actually have a concept. Can I explain
Cool.
it? It's
Let's
called
do it.
relationship math, and it works in your marriage, obviously, but it works in councils and all of the things. If you have somebody that's not showing up fully, they're not present, they're not stating their opinion, they're not even making mistakes, right? Then you have a 0. And any number times 0 is 0, right? And we are counseled to become 1. So even if you have somebody that's just showing up halfway, like they're kind of sharing their opinion, but not very strongly, right? Then you have some fraction, and 1 times any fraction is still the fraction.
That's so true.
So how do we become 1? We all show up 100%, right? If I show up and you show up and everybody else in our council meetings shows up, we get a really strong, united 1. And so that's what's so important. It's so important to learn the relational skills to be able to communicate fully our opinions, our thoughts, even our mistakes.
Yeah. Anything else about fighting in our marriages?
Yeah, that's it. You want to make room for both partners in the marriage. You want both of them to show up 100% fully themselves, right or wrong, right? And that's how you get a strong, united understanding of each other, and the best possible way to make all of the decisions in your life. Create your life together.
Love it. All right, I need every sealer in the church to listen up for this next one. It doesn't belong in our temples. Let's get it out, and that is, don't go to bed angry.
My heart sunk. We were talking to the sealer after my son got married, and he gave some great advice, and it was really fun. It was very powerful sealing, and we were standing in the back with him after, and everybody was going through, and he said, if they let me give more advice in the temple, I would quote, and I wish I could tell you which prophet. At some point, a prophet said, don't ever go to bed angry.
I think it was David O. McKay.
Probably.
So this is even prophetic advice that I don't think he didn't say, thus saith the Lord before.
Yes. And so, yes. And he quoted it. And I went, oh my gosh, I just wrote like a whole chapter in my book.
Then she tackled him in the temple.
Yeah. And I'm like, I really don't want to go against what the prophet says. Right. But again, it probably was very valid and relative when he said it. It's different. Like life changes, right? And so we have so much a better understanding of psychology and the human brain, and we know that we don't make good decisions when we're triggered, when it's late at night, when we're tired, hungry, stressed, or lonely, right? Yeah. And so if you're picking at each other late at night, the goal is not to like figure it out when both of you are not thinking straight and you're tired and loss of sleep. There's all kinds of research on, the importance of sleep and perspective. Yeah. And so I think that the scripture, like, don't let the sun set on your anger, doesn't have anything to do with don't go to sleep angry. It's like, if you're not communicating well about something, please get some rest, take a break, like get a different perspective on it. Right. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times my husband and I, we're both very passionate individuals, and we disagree on a lot of things, right? But when it gets late at night, we do not have the wherewithal to, think clearly, to make good arguments, to understand each other well, right? Yeah. And so the best thing we ever figured out how to do was go to bed, sleep on it, and wake up in the morning with fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and the key is, for me, I remember losing a lot of sleep because a lot of people told me that. In fact, I think the sealer in the temple told us, don't go to bed angry. And I lost a lot of sleep for a lot of years because we'd be picking at each other late at night, and my husband would have no problem, like, I can't talk about this. And he would just turn over and go to bed. And I would lay there sobbing loudly, hoping he would wake up and want to talk to me, or I'd just like jostle him awake. Like, we can't go to bed until we figure this out. Yeah. Right. And he would just be like, it would exacerbate things times 100. He would be like, bro, I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to leave the house. I got to get away from you. Right. And of course that triggered every abandonment issue in my whole,
right.
I'm like packing my bags, like we're getting a divorce. And I remember I did a lot of self-reflection and a lot of work on this. And I finally explained to him, because he didn't have the experience that I had growing up, right? I have a lot of abandonment issues. Like the first thing I went to is he's going to leave me. But he didn't have any of that experience. So it took me having to explain to him, communicate well, my experience of what it feels like when he rolls over and goes to bed. And I'm like, we got to figure this out. But once I did, we came up with a great, tool where I just said, can you just say, I love you. I'm not going anywhere, but I can't think clearly right now. I got to go to bed. Let's talk about it in the morning. Yeah. And once any version of that, I could calm down my nervous system, be like, okay, everything's okay.
Yeah.
Like we're not getting a divorce. It's not going to get worse overnight. I can roll over, go to sleep. And always he would roll over in the morning, give me a big snuggle. I love you. I'm sorry. What do we need? Is there something we need to talk about here? And we did. And it's way more effective than trying to duke it out till the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, so true. In my marriage, and whether it's we're arguing, bickering into each other, or my wife is more of a night owl, I'm more of an early bird. And so sometimes she'll come to me like as I'm getting into bed and she wants to talk about like heavy life issues, like the kids' school or like what we're going to do for what. I'm just like, what if I came to you at 5:30 tomorrow, woke you up and said, hey, let's talk about the kids' school. Right. It's like, there's a boundary here that we'll talk about that, but not right now. Right. And I just need to get some sleep or I'm not going to make a good decision or I'm going to get flustered and frustrated.
So this is an awesome and easy fix. So I teach couples what's called contracting, which is really, really important. So when you have something you want to talk about, whether it's a request you want to make or a big decision that needs to be made, if you'll go to your partner and say, hey, this is weighing heavy on me. I've been thinking about the kids' education. Is this a good time to talk? Mm-hmm. And then of course you could say, nope, I kind of turned my brain off. I'm ready for bed, right? Yeah. Or nope, it's first thing in the morning. I'm not ready to discuss this yet, right? When would be a good time? So we call that contracting, right? So let me, get a good night's rest or let me, wake up, get my workout in, and then I'll be ready to talk about it. Mm. Then you have each other's undivided attention and you're at like the peak time where both of you can really tune in and make a good decision together.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think going back to the general advice, never go to bed angry, it's old-fashioned advice with a good intention, which I think still applies. Basically, it's saying don't maintain your anger or have constant tension, or even like you were saying, don't go small in your marriage and go passive. Like, talk about these things, work them out, figure them out. That doesn't mean you have to do it before you go to bed, but I think generally that's good advice. But in this just having this one line advice can be misinterpreted.
It's really, really interesting because I did have this couple that was so set on this. I mean, I think probably they did get that advice in the temple where they were like, no, I mean, this is law, and I would say, okay, what if you prayed on it? Like if you were just really not getting along and you could say, let's say a prayer and then listen while we sleep. To the answer.
Yeah.
And it really took a lot for them, but they finally were able to like let go of this because they would just have these knockdown dragouts. And I was like, I've been there. Yeah. I know what that feels like. You're not doing anyone any favors by not sleeping. And so if you can like think about it like, okay, you're not really going to bed angry. You're gonna say a prayer for your partner. Like maybe say, I pray that you will figure out what the heck is wrong with you or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then listen, and then you'll get answers in the morning, and you can like revisit that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. All right. Moving on to the next one. The myth of compromise.
Oh, I guess.
I mean, come on, isn't that the golden word in marriage is compromise?
Outdated.
So stop it, Sealers.
Outdated. So outdated. I mean, I think decades ago, compromise was important, right? Like you were in a marriage of convenience, but now we have so many resources, so many options about everything. There's no reason to compromise. And for me, I think compromise means very lazy communication. It means I give, you give, we meet in the middle, nobody gets what they want.
Yeah. So maybe give us some real life examples of what this looks like.
Yeah. So the story I tell in the book, and my favorite story in the whole wide world, is my husband and I, it was our 7-year anniversary. And we went to San Francisco. And to me, anywhere coastal means really good seafood, expensive. Like, you know, so I'm like, what's my dream anniversary date? Is like, we go to an expensive seafood restaurant. We sit by the window. We see the sun setting over the ocean, and it's like an amazing experience, but it's going to cost, right? And my husband doesn't want any part of that. He doesn't like seafood, and he doesn't like to spend a lot of money on dinner, right? And so now, if we compromise, we could probably find a less expensive restaurant somewhere that serves burgers and seafood, and we both get a little bit of what we want, but not really. That would be a compromise. Or we could collaborate. What's most important to you? What's most important to you? Why do you feel so strongly about this? Why do you feel so strongly about this? What are your reservations about this? This is compromise, right? It's getting really curious. It's getting vulnerable. Now, that's not all super necessary when we're talking about what to eat for dinner, but how do we collaborate? How do we come up with something better than either of us could have come up with on our own, where we both get exactly what's important to us? So our solution was, I picked the restaurant. It was an expensive, nice seafood restaurant right on the wharf. We got to sit outside. We got to watch the sunset over, and I was cracking my crab legs, dipping them in butter. I got everything I wanted. Now, if you've been to San Francisco, you know the setup. My husband walked right across the street to In-N-Out. He bought a cheap burger and fries and a milkshake, and that's all he wanted. He walked back into the restaurant. The waitress was like, "Oh, sir, you can't bring that in here." He's like, "Listen, it's my anniversary. My wife wants to eat here." And she was like, I know exactly what to do. She went and got a nice plate, you know, one of those cool milkshake glasses from the bar, plated his dinner, poured his milkshake into a nice glass, and we sat there and enjoyed a really nice evening where I got everything I wanted and he got everything he wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a win-win rather than you get a mediocre something and I get a mediocre something.
Right. Or we keep score. Like, well, if we're paying this much for dinner, then I get to do that, you know.
Yeah.
Compromise is a lot of resentment and a lot of scorekeeping over time.
Yeah. And that pressure builds, right? To the point that we're getting divorced. I don't even know why we're getting divorced. I don't even know who you are, because it's these little things that build over time when we try and compromise.
There's compromise big and small, right? So the story I told is kind of a small thing, but it's a great template for even the bigger things, right? So when I say we have a lot more resources and options than we did before, people can work from anywhere. You can Zoom in, you can work from remote. There's all kinds of options when it comes to commuting. Like, we have so many resources now that we didn't have back then. So when it comes to deciding where you're going to live, what type of work you're going to do, how to educate your children, what the step-by-step formula I would tell you to go through is get really curious about yourself. What is my position on this? What do I feel strongly about? What's important to me and why? And then do the same for your partner. Where do they stand on this issue? What's important to them and why? And then go back. What are my reservations about your position? What are their reservations about my position? Get it all out on the table and then start doing research. Talk to people. Like, there's no reason why you can't come up with something that incorporates the best of what is important to you and the best of what's important to me. And then here's what I always tell people that's really important to remember. Nothing is permanent. You might move your family all the way across the country and then decide this isn't working for us. It's very easy to move your family back or to go through the whole process again and make a different decision. Now you're backed with more experience. You know what doesn't work and why. So none of it is permanent. So make the best decision with all the information that you can gather and try it for a little while. And if it doesn't work, try again.
Love it. When it comes to compromise, I guess where my mind goes with it, I'm not quite sure the answer. Where two people get married, young, they have certain expectations, certain desires. He wants to have a career in such and such. They go to school, they get the degree, they do the things, right? Starts his career. She just is excited to be a mother. She has a few kids and they're doing the thing. And then 15, 20 years pass. And it seems like this is a little bit of a movement now. I don't want to generalize anything, but like suddenly sort of there's this awakening maybe the wife has of being like, you know what? here I am all day, like dealing with kid stuff. I actually did want a career and I did want to go this path. And now it sort of becomes this huge tension where they stepped into the relationship with certain agreements and expectations and things. And then suddenly that changes. And I have sort of empathy for both sides of like, life kind of works out different than we expect. But, that was sort of the agreement, starting that maybe you would be the homemaker and he'd be the one that does the career thing or whatever. And I could see marriages sort of blow up over this where they're trying to compromise or they're trying to what's the better collaborate. They're trying to collaborate, but this just isn't working. And then the marriage just kind of falls apart and the kids are, in the wake of it all. And so what comes to mind as far as like couples who obviously they develop as adults and human beings and maybe they're different places and they have different desires at that point. What comes to mind?
Yeah. So I think the phrase that I hear when I'm working with couples that just like I go, when I hear them say, well, they're just not the same person I married. They've changed. We don't have anything in common anymore. I go, of course they're not the same person that you married. They're not the same person they were 5 minutes ago. I'm going to be a very different person when I get up out of this chair after this conversation with you, just by virtue of that's what we do. We change, we grow, we evolve. And the best marriages make room for both partners to do that, right? And with good communication skills, those agreements that were made initially, because that does happen, right? Like I married her thinking that she was going to stay home with the kids, right? But maybe she, after some years, grew and developed and evolved and decided that wasn't ultimately the most fulfilling thing for her to do, right? Or it's just the way in which, right? So with good communication, those agreements can be renegotiated over and over and over again. And that's what makes a really strong, healthy, passionate, intimate marriage is when you do that. When you're constantly getting to know your partner, when you're curious about what they're learning, how they're changing, what their new passions and interests are, right? That's what keeps the marriage strong and like the juice is flowing.
Yeah.
And so if we keep that in mind and we never, that's a myth, right? If your partner's changed too much, then maybe it's just, they weren't meant to be or something, right? Or something's gone wrong. No, it's like, I support your change, your growth, your self-discovery, all the things. Like I'm in this for the long haul. I choose you. But let's keep renegotiating and so that there's room for both of us here.
Yeah. And just like all things, it's dangerous when you go to a place of like, let's create like fairness. Like you've been working for 15 years. So now you be the stay-at-home dad and I'm going to go work for 15 years. But to sit down and be like, maybe the husband didn't expect that he'd have to spend more time at home while the wife is maybe going back to school or whatever. But it's like they've worked that out. It's like, oh yeah, I can do that. Let's get your degree. And it's going to be maybe a tough 3 or 4 years, but we'll figure it out. And that's okay, right?
Again, what's so cool about the world we live in now is there's so many options and resources for that, right? So I have like good friends of mine. He wants to be a dentist and she wants to be a doctor. And I'm like, how are you? And they want to have a big family, right? And I'm like, how are you going to make that work? And he's like, I'm going to be a stay-at-home dad 3 days a week. She's going to, stay home the other days of the week. We're going to work out our practices so we can do that. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's all right. That's cool. All right. This is why they pay me the big bucks to host a podcast. It's not an easy job. Got to do it. Well, we got to talk about sex. All right.
Yes. My favorite topic.
Now this myth, a good wife keeps her husband satisfied. Let me set it up this way. One of the most shocking awakening perspectives I had as a bishop was how many men came in. Obviously the pornography is a thing, right? But how many men came in and I talked a lot, the nature of the ward I was in, a lot of apartments. So I had a lot of divorcees, like men who recently divorced. And they'd come in and they'd articulate some of their struggles and, their marriage. And, I remember one guy telling me how, his wife was willing to have sex every year on his birthday. And I'm like, excuse me? Like what? Like you live that life? Like it just broke my heart, because I know how intimacy can be such a strength in a marriage, right? Now in our culture, we could probably create a long list of the conference talks or the, the Fifth Sunday lessons where it's stated like, men, You make sure you do date night, right? Like date night is championed in our faith, which is great. Yes, I highly endorse date night, right? Okay. But you'll never hear the advice of like, all right, ladies, you can't use this. You can't weaponize sex. You can't withhold it. You've got to figure it out. Right now, if I was to do the bishop thing again, I wouldn't have a fifth Sunday about sex and intimacy, right? Or again, I would point to resources, but I would definitely say like, hey, if you're not talking about this in your marriage, if one of you is unsatisfied with the arrangement of the sexual relationships, like that's a problem. Don't come to me for help, but you need to find some resources to figure that out, because it's sort of just this silent killer of marriages where, you got to do the date night, but if sex isn't something that's happening on a satisfying level for both, like that's going to sneak up on you, right? And a lot of men will go passive, and I've talked to a lot of men who secretly go to a pornography issue, which obviously isn't healthy, but the whole thing isn't healthy, So a good wife keeps her husband satisfied, which obviously that's old-fashioned advice, but at the same time, like, where's the happy medium in that, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about one of the stats that in healthy, like thriving marriages, sex is like a small part of that equation. But marriages that are struggling, people are going to cite sex a much higher percentage of the problem, right? And so, I think this goes way back to how we teach about our sexuality and its function and purpose and creating excitement around it. So I was thinking about this before I came in, and I've never talked about this before. So excuse my
exclusive content.
If there's holes in my metaphor, like we'll figure it out, but show me some grace, because I haven't fully developed this, but I wish that we would teach sexuality and marriage like driving. Like you need a driver's license to be able to drive. Now, because we've kind of figured out where you've developed enough to like have the large and small motor skills and the wherewithal to make good decisions on the road about driving, right? And you go through a training like a driver's ed to know how to drive. And then when you have displayed competence in that area, we give you a driver's license, and then you get to drive. And it's such a privilege. It's awesome to have the freedom to be able to get where you need to go on your own, drive yourself there, right? It's so cool.
Yeah.
And we take it for granted. And I feel like sexuality and marriage is very similar. Like we should teach how awesome it is to be free with our sexuality, to be able to share it with somebody. But a marriage license, you've got to have a marriage license, right? Like in order to be at the stage where you physically and mentally and emotionally can have the capacity to handle that power. But, if we had where we teach about it, where we don't put I feel like, no, here's the reality. I didn't grow up in the church, so I didn't get the young women's lessons. And like, I don't know all of that. I know what I've experienced in the 25, almost 30 years I've been a member of the church. But I know that we teach about sexuality, like it's dangerous, like you're playing with fire, don't cross the line, right? This no, go. Like these really confusing, conflicting ideas about sex. And I don't think that sex should ever be talked about as something to be afraid of, something dangerous, something that you've got to steer clear of. Just, it's like a really awesome privilege, like something that's so fantastic. You're going to enjoy it so much. It's beautiful and it's connecting and it's, it's spiritual, but you need your license, right? Yeah. And so like we can look forward to it. We can get excited about it, but we've got to go kind of through the training and get our license to be able to really enjoy it. But it's a freedom. Yeah. Just like driving.
Well, and we have, a lot of couples, we have temple prep classes, right? Again, not that your wards have a sexual prep class.
How much do we talk about sex in our temple prep class?
So what advice would you give for a church leader who wants to make sure couples have sex education before have that training?
Yeah, so that's a tough question. I think that sex education should happen at home. I think the big holes that we have in our sexual education are because maybe we rely on the church to teach sex.
Yeah.
Maybe we're so uncomfortable about it. We don't talk about it in our home. I know if that was the case for my husband. So I think the training from the church could come, like, how do we talk about sex at home? How do we make it a natural, normal part of our children's development? How do we talk about it at different stages and phases of our children's lives so that they're not afraid of it, so that they don't think it's gross or scary or dangerous, right? How do we teach them about their bodies and how they function and, this wonderful, magical thing that you're going to get to do with your spouse someday? So I don't necessarily think that the church should be directly teaching that, but I do think that we should have lots of resources and lots of opportunities for parents in those fifth Sunday meetings to learn, how do we talk about sex at home? How do we not make it this scary topic that we just don't want to talk about?
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind, if I was to do it over again, I was a bishop so young. I'm like, man, if I could do it again, I'd do so much better. But I think every bishop does that. Yeah, who knows? But I think one direct conversation I would have as a bishop with parents of youth, I would be very clear. I'm not doing the law of chastity lesson. It's not on my shoulders as the bishop to communicate is French kissing okay? And what if you lay down? Or I'm not drawing those boundaries. That's up to you. Now I'm here as a resource. If you don't know where to start, you need a good book, you need an online resource or whatever, I can point you that way, but I'm not doing it, right? And so to really push it back on, because I think in the 80s and 90s, there's sort of this feeling of all right, bishop, go ahead and talk about the law of chastity. And then I feel like we've gotten to this place of let's just not talk about it at all. And, how's that working for you?
Just leave everybody to their own devices. There's so many books, resources, awesome podcasts, experts that talk about these things. There's so many great resources that, why not? As a bishop, read up on it. You're going through it on your own. Most bishops have families they're, raising, and, they need to know it for themselves too. So why not get really resourced in that area? And then, I would love to teach a sex education class in church. That would be my favorite calling in the whole wide world. I think you're supposed to ask me that later, but
we're teasing upcoming content, the full series by Monica Tanner
but I mean, why not? Yeah. I've trained in it. I know a lot of things, right? And so, and there's lots of people in the church that know that. And so if parents want those resources, let's have those for them.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else about sex or a good wife keeps her husband satisfied, or anything else we haven't touched on in that realm?
Yeah, I just think a good marriage prep class that talks about sexuality and not this, I think the way we teach modesty, chastity in the church, and it's getting better. It is getting a lot better. But I think we teach a lot that, women are the gatekeepers. It's our job to be modest so that men's minds don't go places. And, we kind of have to make sure that our husbands don't get out of control. And so we got to rein it in. And we're responsible for their sexual needs. And, there's just this narrative, whether again, overt or covert, it's just there.
Yeah, that's so true. The way you frame that of before there's sort of that, the cultural norm of don't be too immodest, and then marriage happens to be a little immodest because you got to make sure things are okay around here, right?
Yeah, and but you don't want your husband to get any ideas and
exactly.
If you,
it's interesting, and that's the thing with it's not the women's job or the low desire spouse's job. It's both of your job, but don't just ignore it, right?
Yeah, there's so much communication that needs to happen again, which is why I think it's so important to suggest that you get a good coach for just a few sessions. Hash some of this stuff out. Learn how to talk about your sex life. I think every couple should have a sex talk Tuesday where you go for a walk on a Tuesday and you reevaluate, how's this going for us? What can we change? How can we make it better for both of us, right? And I think that there's so many, I would love to give young couples assignments, hey, Tuesdays are your night. You do for the wife, you do everything that feels good to you, everything that you think is awesome. You get to design the night, and your husband just has to do everything you want. Thursdays are the husband's night. He gets to design everything, right? That's not to say you have to say yes to everything or something that makes you uncomfortable, but that just means like keep an open mind. Like you're going to learn about each other in this way. Like I would like assign them games, like play the 3-minute touching game, like, right? Like you're in charge. Teach your husband like what, ways that you like to be touched sexually and non-sexually, right?
Yeah.
Like that would just be so fun to get a new, newlywed couple who are just, and go through all this with them. Like it's going to benefit you more than you could possibly imagine to learn all these things about each other, to open up the lines of communication so that it's not something that 20 years from now, the husband's like, this sucks.
Yeah.
And the wife's like, nobody ever taught me anything about this. And now they're trying to figure it out, right? It's like, anyways.
All right, Temple Sealers, let's normalize this. I want to hear about Sex Talk Tuesday in a ceiling.
Sex Talk Tuesday.
Date night and Sex Talks Tuesday. Oh, boy. Such good advice. Practical and kind of funny because we don't talk about it. So I turn into a 9-year-old and giggle a little bit.
Go.
But let me ask about, obviously, we don't have limits here. We can talk as long as we want. But I see this in the clinical term is codependency. It's often framed as the nice guy syndrome. I see it in a lot of husbands. Maybe that's just because I'm a man and where we become the super nice guy, especially early on in marriage. Like I just want to like be, at her every need and be kind and make sure everything's okay. And that's when we kind of turn in. It goes terrible, the long term. It's not a good way where the man's always playing small. It's the happy wife, happy life dynamic.
I was going to say it's because either your father or your father-in-law or some, important male in your life said, make sure your wife is happy. Happy wife, happy life. Like that's the only way to do it. Right. And I see it all the time on social media, the young kids walking around with a microphone, finding these older couples. And, it's like, I cringe so much when I hear this. And the husband's like, she wears the pants. You just got to keep her happy. So many things wrong with this. Yeah. But one is that's a lot of responsibility for a woman to be like, the emotional caretaker of the environment of the home, like meaning like I can't ever be unhappy because then A, my husband isn't doing a good job of keeping me happy, and B, like the most important thing here is to keep me happy, or I'm going to be a nag, or nothing goes well when mom's unhappy, right? No, like that's a lot of pressure for me to like just be happy all the time or whatever, right? And so like we all have the opportunity to be happy. We all have the opportunity to be sad, but a marriage based where one person's happiness is prioritized over the other is never gonna work out in the long run. Like we may like joke about that and think that's funny, and maybe that worked decades ago, but it's certainly not going to work now. You're going to create a dynamic where the husband withdraws, stops giving his opinion. Like, why does it matter what I think? Where she's going to get her way anyways. Like, a lot of resentment, a lot of withdrawal, a lot of problems with that. So in the book, I list 10 reasons why we should not ever operate under the assumption that happy wife, happy life. It's happy house, happy spouse. How can we make room, again, for both partners to really like show up fully, make mistakes, get what they want, all of those things. That's what marriage is. It's a partnership. It's not a hierarchy.
And I think this is a good example of ways that we can bring like Christ into our marriage, where a phrase that I learned from all my therapist friends of like, do you have it to give? Right. So I may come home from a busy day and I'm exhausted. I'm like, this is just one of those days. And then maybe I'm perceiving my wife is having a similar day. I'm like, oh, she's not happy. Okay, how's this going to go? Now, naturally, I want to turn into the nice guy and say, okay, I can drum up some strength and just like, I'll go do the dishes and I'll make dinner and I'll put the kids to bed. Right.
And if I do all those things, then she might have sex with me.
Exactly. Right. Oh. And then I'll feel better once that happens. Right. And so, but oftentimes I'm reassessing, saying, actually, do I have it to give? And sometimes I'm like, I don't. And well, then what? Like, then what's going to happen? That's an opportunity for me to say, I just got to give her to God. I can't fix her. I can't be everything for her, but Jesus can. So hopefully she'll look to Jesus, and once I sleep on it and we can regroup or whatever, right? But I think it's I always come back to this question of, do I have it to give? And sometimes I've even said to my wife, I'm like, I'm so sorry you're in this place, or you're having a rough day, or you're sad or whatever. I just don't have it to give. I'm so sorry.
What if you had the communication skills to be able to come in and say, man, I had the worst day. I've got about 10% in the tank to give tonight, like nothing, right? And what if your wife could come in and say the same thing? Oh, my day was awful. I've got about, together we have 20%. We might need to call in reinforcements.
Yeah.
Right? We might need to call our parents. We might need to call a babysitter. So we could go out and have sex talk Tuesday. Like literally, like what if you could both just come in full disclosure and honesty and be like, here's what I've got. You know, if we don't have enough together, we're part of this amazing community, right? Maybe we can call the teenager down the street and be like, hey, can you put on a movie for our kids? Because we got to go for a drive, or we just got to get out of here, right? We're going to go grab a milkshake together.
Yeah.
So that the ability to communicate like that, to show up with whatever you've got, and to have a spouse that's not going to judge, that's not going to be hard on you, that's just going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling the same way. What do we do? How do we get through this together?
Yeah. And I think I heard Brené Brown, this concept of like marriages. We often say marriage is 50-50, but sometimes it's like, I show up, I got 20%. What do you got?
Yeah.
It's like 40%.
Yeah. And what if I could honestly say, yeah, I've got the 80%.
Yeah.
We've got
I'll do the kids tonight. I'll do the dinner, whatever.
Yes.
And we'll figure it out. Why don't you go lay down? And you know, those are beautiful moments where you can really show up in your marriage, right? That way. So I guess what I'm getting at is like, I often see that trait, and it happens on the female side as well, but with how men show up in relationships is like, I'm just going to be super nice. And, you know, the covert contract of like, if I'm super nice, then I'll get what I want, even though we may not be thinking that's sort of what we're doing. Is there anything like any male female traits in a marriage that you see more common than not? Let's sort of like for women, is there a certain type of thing they go to that is actually not so good?
Yeah. Just before we just go to that is, you know, the nice guy, I'll just suck it up and, you know, hope that I get rewarded later or whatever. That always comes out sideways.
It's so true.
So
I speak from experience here. Anyways,
yeah, I do too. Yeah. I mean, like, well, I can handle it. Like we always say, like everybody gets to go crazy, but not at the same time. But there's been times where I'm like, we both need to lose it right now, you know? Yeah. And so like, what if we could just, you know, be straightforward and honest with each other and love each other and be like, all right, neither of us, we're all going crazy right now. What are our options? Yeah. How do we get through this together? Right. You know, maybe we have a teenager, maybe we have a teenager like in our home that we can be like, mom and dad are going to lose it.
Yeah.
You're in charge.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's all the reality, but the men, women traits, I think good men want their spouses to be happy. Good women want to care for the people that they love, right? Yeah. I mean, that's just, it's given to us. It's a God-given quality, right? But I think the activator of it is communication.
Yeah.
I don't know how to help you. I don't know how to be here for you. We can't read each other's minds. That's a myth in the book, right? If they love me, they just know. No, they can't read your mind. They never will be able to read your mind. Nobody knows what you need better than you do. And I think a big thing that we run into in the church, out of the church, everywhere, is that we expect people to just know. Like if I have to tell them, then it, you know, whatever. Yeah. But we also have a hard time asking for what we want. Like I think maybe in the culture, I don't know, but like we have a hard time just asking for what we want, right? Like we feel like that shows weakness, or we shouldn't have to, or we don't know how to ask for what we want. And I think if we can learn those relational skills, how do I make a request? Like, how do I ask for what I need in this moment right now? How do I look inside and be like, man, something's not right. I need something here. What is it? You know, and then be able to express that to our loved ones, to our support group, to people who can help us, right? So important. It's okay to have wants. It's okay to have needs. And it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. So true. Well, I want to make sure people know where to get the book, but is there any other point, principle, concept that you want to make sure we hit on before we wrap up, or did we do pretty good?
Yeah, I think we did great. I mean, of course, I think we could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours, but
they can go read for hours and hours and hours.
Yes,
right?
yes. But this book won't take you hours and hours to read.
Good.
It's fast.
Oh, cool.
It's fast. It's meant to be this kind of a quick resource. Like, you know, I hope that the stories are funny. I hope that it makes you smile. And I hope that you put it down with hope that, like, we can have everything we want out of our life, out of our marriage. We just have to learn the skills.
Yeah. And I think it would be a great book for bishops to have in their office library to say, hey, why don't you read this one or see
Give
where
it to
it
all
goes.
the newlyweds.
That's right. For sure. So Amazon, any place specific you'd send people to get the book or to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so it's available. It will be available on Amazon and other big retailers, but you can go to badmarriageadvice.com and you'll get all the information there, or you can go to monicatanner.com and learn how to work with me and all the other free resources that there are there.
Love it. All right, last question I have for you, as you reflect on just this journey you've been on, talking with couples and coaching them and learning more about relationship, how has focusing on that relationship changed your relationship with Jesus Christ?
I love it because, so I grew up Jewish. We didn't really touch on this.
That's all. We got to do another episode. Here we go.
Like, rewind.
Wow.
I have talked about this on a lot of podcasts, but I grew up in a Jewish family. So me learning about Jesus changed my life. And it sounds very cliche, but growing up, for the better portion of my childhood, I went to a school that was about half and half. It was half Christian, half Jewish. And so we did funny Jewish things like Passover, when we would eat crackers during, matzah during Passover. But there was a big group of us. We all did it together. The Christian kids they did weird stuff too. And we just kind of left each other alone in our things. But when I turned 12, my parents got a divorce and I went to a public school where there was no Jewish kids. And that's when I started to get bombarded with, I grew up in Texas in the Bible Belt, and all my friends were like, you've got to get baptized. You've got to accept Jesus or you are going to hell. And so that's kind of when all my questions started, like, okay, well, tell me about this Jesus, right? Like, what about all the people who were born before him? Like, do they just go to hell? Yep. Or what if I decide I don't want to be baptized? Like, do I just go to hell? Yep. And so I'm like, wait, how does this work, right? Only some of us get saved. Only some of us have the opportunity to get saved. And so I was real skeptical about the idea of Jesus and the atonement for many years of my life, until I went to college and I started, the church kind of found me. I was the golden contact. Oh, cool. But it wasn't until I learned about my relationship with the Savior, the atonement, that I really did, come to know him and that his role in my life. And that changed everything. My motivations for everything, my fears, my peace, everything. Understanding my relationship to a Father in heaven and to my Savior, Jesus Christ. And so when my kids go out on missions, I tell them, the gospel is important, but here's what changes lives. When people understand their relationship to God and their relationship to Jesus Christ. That's what changes lives, and that's what changes marriages.